Would you ever hear Netflix on an earnings call saying, well, our innovation was down a bit this month because everyone was a bit busy, too many meetings? You would never hear that. It's a choice to actually innovate rather than hoping we can just tell people to innovate more often, more loudly.
For a business to transform, is innovation at the heart of that?
We create environments for ourselves where the best we can do is incremental performance. It's just not enough anymore.
Elvin Turner is an award-winning innovation advisor and best-selling author of Be Less Zombie. He's helped global corporations, governments and startups unlock real, scalable growth. His work is all about replacing business as usual with bold, purposeful innovation. And today, he's here to show you how to make innovation a deliberate choice.
What do you see of the future? If we should be looking out for something, where do you see innovation going?
Take advantage of the headwinds that AI can provide. It can do a lot of the grunt work. We're saving maybe 30-40% of people's time. What do? Do we reduce the size of our teams by 30 or 40%? Or actually, do we use this as an opportunity to make innovation a true source of competitive advantage?
So, good morning and welcome to Transformation Talks. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Elvin Turner. I've known Elvin for maybe 7 years now, I think, since we first met. And for those who don't know Elvin's absolutely a guru in the innovation space. He's the author of the best-selling book, Be Less Zombie. But maybe, Elvin, you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background. That'd be super.
Yeah, sure. So, as you say, I wrote Be Less Zombie 5 years ago now. I can't believe it's been that long. Several books in the pipeline, have been for a while. They're coming. They're really coming. But yeah, most of my work is working. It tends to be with large organizations that are trying to do difficult stuff and trying to figure out the future. So I work kind of in the crossover between strategy, innovation and change. But I guess I spend most of my time in the innovation space, helping companies figure out innovation strategy and culture particularly. So I did a lot of work with leadership teams, but then also grassroots implementation as well. Then I teach on MBA programs in the entrepreneurship programs generally, or innovation management. That keeps me pretty busy.
Fantastic. So, I mean, there's not a lot you don't know about the innovation space, Elvin. And I've always, whenever we've chatted, it's always been great to hear your thoughts and your thinking. I'm going to kick off with a question whereby lots of organizations talk about transformation and innovation, and they all talk about it being vital to their organization. But in your experience, what actually makes the difference between those organizations talking about it and those that actually manage to be successful?
This is the way I would start most conversations with organizations. And I'd ask the question, what's the one thing do you think the great innovators do that most of the other organizations don't? And the simple answer is it's a choice. It's a choice to actually innovate rather than hoping we can just squash it in around the edges and tell people to innovate more often, more loudly, and surprise, surprise, people just can't fit it into their day job. So the choice to innovate at a senior leadership level, I think, is the one thing that distinguishes those great organizations. I mean, would you ever hear Netflix on an earnings call saying, well, our innovation was down a bit this month because everyone was a bit busy, too many meetings, too much bureaucracy? You would never hear that. So they've made a choice, and any organization can make a choice. It's not about being Netflix or Google or anyone else. It's about a determined effort to figure out how we're going to do innovation. You've never done it before. You can learn. You can get help. It's not that it's something that's entirely out of reach. It is difficult, but you have no choice because the future's coming anyway. It's the pursuit of relevance. We're running out of relevance all of the time and trying to stay ahead. And that's the heartbeat of innovation. So that choice to create an environment, an infrastructure in which innovation can work, and go the journey to put that in place. So you've got the process, you've got strategy, you've got capabilities, resources, culture, and leadership. If you're deliberate about those things, I find that innovation becomes more of an inevitability because you've set things up like metrics that pull it out of the system, rather than it being a fight to make the system innovate, when actually all it's optimized for is delivering the status quo, which we need, but it's not enough.
When we talk about this, it's really sponsorship from the very top. Then that choice, it's without the leadership having this as a key driver for their organisation. Are we seeing that organisation? I mean, I certainly see that, but it's that the experience without that leadership actually saying, not only saying this is important, but actually fundamentally backing up that statement with support, financial and people and manpower and time and everything else.
I'm careful about this because most people listening to this are probably not the most senior people in the organisation, and they can't make that choice. And then you think, well, okay, then we're screwed. We're never going to innovate if the leaders don't choose it. Yeah. And I'm very careful in Be Less Zombie to kind of create two scenarios. One is best case scenario. You have a switched on leadership team. You've got an innovation strategy. You've got the infrastructure set up. Everybody's aligned, and we're off. That's best case scenario. I would say it's quite rare. The other side, though, is just being more pragmatic and saying, well, what if I don't have that? Well, you can start where you are, and you just have to recalibrate things around how much time and space that you can create yourself. What can you influence? What do you have to accept? And what can you change? And it's about creating an environment around you where it's kind of more guerrilla, is under the radar a little bit. And you're doing lots of experimentation. You're trying to create data that gives leaders more confidence in their decision making. So it's not necessarily either or. And most of my work actually is helping teams in an environment where the leadership hasn't yet said yes, and we're on a journey to try and convince them that this is something that you can manage and you can measure, because that's often one of the worries about it. So yeah, it's tricky, but it's doable.
Yeah, I like that. I hadn't thought of it that way, that it's also a choice at the personal level or at the team level to go out and invest in that innovation space, even if you haven't got the leadership. I have to say, we're a technology provider to support the innovation transformation journey, and certainly where we see the most success is where the leadership have underpinned the whole innovation space. You certainly see longevity and support. So on the flip side of this, what are the biggest factors that you see, or the biggest factor that you see that holds innovation back? I'm out there, I want to innovate. I've got the support of the leadership, but what should I look out for? What's going to stop me innovating?
Pick your battle. I mean, there's in Be Less Zombie, I have a picture of a sumo wrestler fighting this little skinny guy who represents innovation. And time, bureaucracy, fear of failure, risk aversion, they're all on a graphic equalizer. They all matter everywhere. Some matter more than others in different locations. The one thing that I would say, if we're going to pick one, is actually time.
Yeah.
Because everybody tells me I'm already working at 120%, and now I'm being told I need to innovate, which I'd love to do, but that means I've already got a second job once the kids are in bed. When am I going to do this? And we're pushing innovation into a space potentially which is creating more and more burnout inside people. I would say in the last 18 months, probably 50% of my work has been helping organizations to create that time and capacity to innovate so that they can innovate. And I'm an innovation consultant, an advisor, and I don't get paid if there's no budget. And often I say to organizations, there's not a lot of point in us trying to actually get started with very much unless we can create space for you to do the work. Otherwise, this is doomed to failure. And, putting to one side the fact there's often not an innovation budget anyway inside an organization, it's really tough. So what I've started saying to organizations is, look, let's just start by applying the tools of innovation to the biggest innovation challenge, which is no one's got time to do it. And we have to create that dedicated space. And it is possible, but it does require some different ways of thinking and working and valuing our time so that we don't allow the status quo just to kind of eat everything, which it tends to do.
And I guess sometimes that's linked to sponsorship, having the senior level or the executive level or management level who say that actually let's take a day out or take time out every week. I know some organizations actively do this with parts of their business to just focus on the innovation. And I know you work with organizations to help them make more of the time.
Yeah.
When we look at innovation, one of the things that I feel organizations absolutely do struggle with, especially when they're early to innovation. For me, it's not just about innovating. It's about, which is for a lot of people, the measure is coming up with lots of ideas. It's about the value generation from those. Is that something you're seeing? Or do you think organizations should focus not just on getting 300 new things, but actually adding value to pertinent parts of the business?
Inevitably, we've got to leave with value. And if innovation isn't creating value, then, we might as well pack it in and then go home. But I just on that point of value, I think sometimes we're a little bit too narrow in our definition of it. We talk about, efficiency and growth, the financial stuff. But actually, a lot of my work, I find there's, what are we learning that could then be spread as knowledge across the organization? I find individuals find innovation work some of the most enjoyable, rewarding, purpose-driven work that they do, and they absolutely love doing it. It's a form of employee engagement. And when you roll that out and think, actually, we want to be a place that attracts the best people on the planet. Well, the best people on the planet want to come and do their career best work somewhere. And that usually means solving really difficult problems in an environment that's going to help me do that. If you can get a reputation as a team or an organization where you're creating an environment where people can do that stuff, you're going to have a queue of talent outside your door that wants to come in. That's a form of value that you can create by doing innovation well that I don't think that we talk about very much. But I would say, I think it's both. I think it's about creating value, but also it's about measuring that innovation process. So you talked about number of ideas. Well, there's leading indicators and lagging indicators. Yeah. And we all know that great outcomes start with 1 million ideas 300 ideas coming in. You're going to need that to get one idea coming out. So I think it's having an innovation strategy that is pulling us somewhere that's going to create value. But part of that strategy is being very rigorous. And I think this is an act of good stewardship, is making sure that we're tracking those leading and lagging indicators so that we're setting ourselves up for success. And we're measuring all aspects of that innovation ecosystem. So we're creating an environment in which those value outputs can be created and realized.
I absolutely get that, because it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? If you create a culture of innovation and you get known for innovation, you get more innovators, you're going to do better in innovation, and the whole thing's going to accelerate. I mean, I'm a big fan of having measures of some sort, and those measures could be cultural engagement factors, and not just, because you're right, quite often the one thing that everyone's focused on is cost reduction, for example. How many pounds are we going to, dollars are we going to save? The one thing I do see, though, is if you don't have measures, the innovation team gets cut, or the innovation function gets cut quite easily, because senior executives sit there and go, well, this is great, we've got 300 ideas, but I'm not seeing the value, so why should I continue with the investment in this process? Do you see innovation being on the receiving end when things are hard, because they struggle to justify their being in a numerical way that the execs are going to respond to?
It's tough. And when things get hard, it's always, in my experience anyway, it's marketing, HR, and HR programs, particularly learning and development programs, and innovation that takes the hit, and which we all know deep down is crazy. But sometimes one of the things that I found is that it is important to focus on the metrics, because that's what we're there to deliver. We're a function like anybody else. We've got to create value. But quite often, I think one of the biggest barriers to innovation succeeding is that a lot of the senior executives that are sponsoring it have never actually led innovation in their own right. And if they have, it tends to be just incremental stuff. They've got to where they are by virtue of success, probably incremental value improvements over time, with not necessarily ever had to create an environment where we've got a portfolio of risk showing up. And we're also going out there with some 10x ideas that are bound to fail. What does it take to actually create a culture that can hold that steady and make it really successful. Most leaders have never had to do that. And the training they've had is usually, half a day on a beanbag in California somewhere saying, this is what innovation is like. I'm exaggerating, but typically, I'm someone who goes in and helps run innovation training programs. Typically, you don't get a lot inside organizations. So in some respects, it's not a leader's fault. But where I'm going with this is you have to sometimes take on the role as a kind of a passive educator of your board or your executive team around how innovation works. And if there's one thing that worked really well with that, it sounds dull, but it's innovation maturity assessments. Because once you have shown an organization's executive team, here's the 10 dimensions that innovation absolutely needs to fire on all cylinders. And here's how we rank. And therefore, here's what's the best we're going to be able to deliver. And if we go on a journey of A, B, and C, we're going to lift the levels all the way around, and that's going to create a higher performing innovation function. It does two things. One, it helps educate the executive team around, we can't expect miracles here. Just like if we were in finance, what systems would we need? What training would we need? It starts to give language to the executive team and understanding without feeling like you're teaching them around what it really takes to innovate well. And then you can say, well, what level of ambition do we have? If we really want to be known as the first to market in our market around innovation, and we've got that innovation brand, what kind of profile is that going to take in this innovation maturity assessment, and where are we going to have to over-index? And it starts to give tangible pathways of investment and development so that we have the inputs that create the outputs. So I think inevitably it's going to come down to, where's that? Show me the money. What do we actually make here? But I think the more you can upskill the board in understanding this is actually a more sophisticated, more nuanced approach to business that we need to understand, it can cut you some slack and actually have some more grown up conversations about what it really takes to innovate, because it is very easy just to say, well, we'll cut it there without really understanding what you're cutting and the ripple effect of that in 1, 2, 3 years time.
Yeah, Elvin, thank you. That's a great takeaway, I think, for anyone involved in innovation, that part of that role of champion innovation is not just around communicating to your colleagues about innovation. It's about understanding how they can influence the executive level to understand that the innovation is important, not just purely from a financial basis, albeit we all know that's going to be quite key, but also from many other benefit perspectives that they should be looking at. Now, we talk a lot about business transformation, end-to-end process. And for a business to transform, is innovation at the heart of that? Is it the only thing, or is it just one piece of the puzzle, do you think?
Different things get called different things in different places, don't they? And I quite often go into work with a team, and they're the change team, or they're the transformation team, or they're the continuous improvement team. And it's all about definitions, isn't it? Or the innovation team. So I end up inevitably working with all. Innovation for me is looking at the genesis of, there's a problem to solve, there's value we need to create, and we're in pursuit of discovering what that thing is. And I think depending on how you're set up, I find that the front end of innovation is potentially the bit that causes most difficulty between, transformation, change and projects and other offices. And that's typically because, I am exaggerating and generalizing here to some extent, but the typical methodologies that we use for projects and change and transformation, although this is changing, my big caveat, they're more aligned to, we kind of know what we want to change, and now we're going to roll out that change. And not in the process, we need to figure out how we're going to embed this in the organization and what the customer journey will need to be and stuff like that. What we're less good at is figuring out what's the thing we want to change, which is typically, I think, is the role of innovation, is what's the value shift that we want to create, and what's it going to take to do that, the how, if you like. And because some of those other tools in the other spaces are more, they lend themselves more to linear, predictable processes, and often you've got a project, got to deliver it by a certain time. That means we need a right answer by a certain time that we're going to roll out. That doesn't always sit well when you're in early discovery stage and you're still trying to figure out what's the thing here that what's the real problem? And you're going backwards and forwards between solution and problem discovery and all of that stuff. That's where it can get tricky. And the reason I say all of that is I bump into people all of the time who have just finished a project or program and they're sort of satisfied with it. And I say, well, what's going on? What's the issue? Why I sense some dissatisfaction. And they'll say, well, it was really exciting at the front. We had this great problem to solve. And we came up with this great idea. So we created the MVP and we rolled it out and we got 10, 15 customers and they really liked it. And then the funding got pulled because the organization basically said, okay, well, job done. Let's scale. And then we've got an MVP there in the market, which really is not a finished product. And now it's creating all sorts of friction and tension back into the organization as we scale, because we don't have back-end processes and everything set up in order to support what's really a half-baked beginning of an idea, but we're calling it a solution and we're selling it. And now it's in the sales brochures and it's on our website. So and it gets a momentum of its own. So some of that is around being more comfortable with the discovery process and giving it the time that it needs. Then also being realistic about the investment, what it takes to deliver something to market at scale, at quality, that doesn't then punish the originating organization because it hasn't joined the dots on what's required to embed and to scale. So, I am generalizing because there are some great transformation teams out there doing amazing work. But if I rock up at a typical organization, that's a dynamic that I see quite often.
See, this is interesting. Your words, joining the dots, is something I experience a lot. And I talk about myself in that, when I go to an organization and talk to them about business transformation, I'll find somewhere there'll be someone responsible for strategy. Then there'll be another team or teams responsible for innovation. You might have an innovation team, you might have R&D. Then you'll have project management teams responsible for projects. You very rarely have people responsible for once the project's finished. I have to say, benefit realization seems to go astray. And I talk to organizations about how hard it is to really do business transformation if you've got lots of disconnected parts of the business. So how do you follow a journey from strategy through coming up with brilliant things, delivering all those brilliant things as in the form of projects, and then actually keeping going to get the benefits afterwards if you don't have a single responsible person, responsible organization to underpin it? Do you see that as an issue as well? Do you find that people aren't the project people blame the innovation people people blame the project people?
Yeah, a little bit. And sometimes that's down to unclear, if you've got a stage gate process, unclear decision-making protocols and bad behavior sometimes from leaders who just throw their toys out and get cross, and they've got a personal, there's politics going on, and that what should be a good decision-making process breaks down. And that comes back to culture and leadership and someone at the top actually doing something about that, which isn't necessarily something that everyone listening to this can influence, but they are realities that we have to encounter. There is one thing that I think is helpful, though. It's an idea that I call magic metrics. And it's completely borrowed from 3M. I have to put them out there as the disclaimer, really, which is, 3M talks about having this metric of every year, 20% of your revenue must come from products that didn't exist 4 years ago. That's what it is. 20% of your revenue today must come from products that didn't exist 4 years ago. So that puts an inevitable energy into the system, because if, as a leader, I'm not going to get my bonus unless I deliver that in my division, I'm on the line for it. I'm actually on the line for delivering today and designing tomorrow, and there's no escaping it. And I think that puts a positive tension into the system because it pulls innovation, at least innovation ambition, out of you. And it stops what we've just talked about to some extent, because if you can't come up with 300 ideas and 2 of them sort of take off and then we get a little trickle of revenue. You've got to deliver 20%. So that means you've got to find ideas that not just resonate with customers, but you've got to be able to scale really well and deliver them, which means the processes and the embedding all has to join up. So this idea of magic metrics, what's the metric that will snap the whole thing into alignment, I think is a really useful conversation to have inside organizations.
Yeah, do you know, I haven't heard that before, but I absolutely love that 20%. And you can even see nowadays that for some industry sectors, that's possibly not even going to be enough. The rate of change that we're seeing, the speed of the acceleration. But yeah, and you can see how that focuses the mind.
I think actually it's 30%. I think I might have my wires crossed. Anyway, it's a great metric. Look it up. It's online. It's a great story. Yeah,
I love it. And if you had that as a business driver in your organization, you could absolutely see how you could drive innovation. If everybody knew that 30% of money had to come from things we didn't do today, it's a great focus for the mind, isn't it? That maybe goes very nicely into now your best-selling book, Be Less Zombie. You came up with that name from somewhere. How did you come about Be Less Zombie? I mean, other than that, it's an amazingly catchy name, by the way, for a book. But
yeah, it was kind of by accident. I was doing some work with Henley Business School at the time, and they used to run this program where every year I'd come in and just basically run an innovation program. And I've been running it for a few years, and we all started to get a bit bored with it, if I'm really honest, because we were doing the same old stuff. So we said, well, let's come up with something different. At the time, this is going back 6 or 7 years ago, all the talk was about unicorns, a unicorn company. Yeah. What is it that makes a unicorn? So we talked about having a session to say, well, what actually goes on behind the scenes of a unicorn, in their ways of working. And not all of those would necessarily be relevant to, a standard large organization. But if we were to create, a pole or an axis, and at one end you've got unicorns who are nailing it, they're on fire. What would you have at the other end? And we just came up with zombies. So we thought, well, okay, we'll come up with this program called Unicorns versus Zombies, and the 10 secrets of a unicorn. And that's kind of my world anyway, doing all the research. So we went to Henley Business School, and I drew a line on the floor. I said, the first thing we're going to do is find out how many zombies there are in the room. So I gave them a broad definition of what a zombie is. So an organization that's, it's the living dead. It's running on empty. It's all about relevance and the relevance of why we exist and what we do and how we do it. It really feels like we're struggling. So that's the zombie, the unicorn. Here's the 10 dimensions. Go and stand on the line as a representative of your brand, where you think, how would you characterize yourself? Go. Everybody ran to the zombie end, and were fighting to be as far as they could at the end of the zombie. It was a bit of fun, but it just got me thinking, maybe there's something in this. So the book idea actually just came from that silly exercise.
It works because you can relate to it straight away. I think it's absolute genius. So I guess the last question for you. I mean, everyone talks about AI all the time, but for you, what do you see of the future? If we should be looking out for something, where do you see innovation going?
Well, I kind of like to flip it, if you don't mind. Because of course we can pick a trend and we can figure out and interpret what the implications would be. I'd almost like to suggest that organizations create a new trend for themselves, which is take advantage of the headwinds that AI can provide, which is, it can do a lot of the grunt work. It can take away a lot of the stuff that is low value work day to day. It can streamline, particularly in innovation. We all know AI tools now in the innovation process is amplifying, accelerating everything if we want it to. That I think leaves organizations and leaders with a really interesting choice. Okay, so we're saving maybe 30-40% of people's time doing that stuff, which AI can now do better. What do we do? Do we reduce the size of our teams by 30 or 40%? Or actually, do we use this as an opportunity to give space to people finally to do innovation work, to make innovation a true source of competitive advantage, to make ingenuity something that we're truly serious about, and we create that queue of talent coming to the door that we talked about earlier on? I think the temptation will be to reduce team size and overload people with more stuff. And I think that would be a massive mistake, because if you look at all of the numbers around where does most value get created, It's the bigger, bolder ideas that deliver absolute competitive differentiation that are the ones that are the long-term blockbuster effects on profitability and gross margin. And yet we create environments for ourselves where the best we can do is incremental performance, and it's just not enough anymore. So I think organizations that want to accelerate and amplify their performance in their industry in the next 5 years, where AI is going to, and not just AI, Internet of Things and blockchain, all the other things that are coming together, companies are going to be very different. And I think the choice to innovate company structure, particularly around ways of working, around creating time and space for people to do truly imaginative, game-changing work, will differentiate organizations that kind of just use AI as an add-on and just try and grind out more productivity. I think you're missing half the benefit of what AI could deliver, at least.
I fear, like you, though, that organizations will view it as a way of either reducing cost or just continuing the burn of the people and still not investing in innovation. And maybe that's a symptom that executives quite often in businesses are transient in that they need to just look at the short-term gains that they can make to report the numbers to the investors rather than the 5-year plan or the 10-year plan. But I'd love that to be the case, Elvin. It's a real positive takeaway for us. Thank you so much for spending half an hour with us, giving us the benefit of your experience. Thank you.
Great. Good to see you again, Ivan.
And likewise, good to see you.